Welcome to the Next Level Facebook Ads Podcast with Phil Graham. We help you master Facebook ads and give you an unfair advantage over your competition. Are you ready? Let's go.
What's up, podcast family? Welcome to the Next Level Facebook Ads Podcast, episode 390. I'm Phil Graham. Today, I'm going to be talking about how we optimize Facebook and Instagram ads in just around 20 minutes a day. Now, many times we spend more than 20 minutes. It depends on the client. It depends on the situation, but it doesn't have to take forever to make changes and try and improve your ads. Now, before we dive in, it's always important to point out that every business is unique. Results can vary. There's no guaranteed outcomes. So just keep that in mind. So let me ask you guys a question. Do you ever feel frustrated or overwhelmed by all the things you need to do in order to run your ads and to try and optimize your ads to get better results? If so, you are not alone. So many other people feel that way. So today, I want to try and help simplify things for you guys. So look, typically, 20 minutes a day is not a replacement for pro-level ad optimization. We often spend much more time than that. But I will say this, optimizing your ads also doesn't have to take forever. And making small, consistent changes can sometimes make a very big difference and big impact as time goes on, especially if you guys are doing it with a high level of skill. So even though it's not always the ideal amount of time, if you are running your ads and you're short on time, 20 minutes a day sometimes can still make a very big difference. Now, I want to be clear, there are so many variables based off of the kind of business you have, what your strategy is, what your budget is. For some people, they might need 20 minutes a day. Someone else might need 20 minutes a week. Somebody else might need 20 minutes an hour. And someone else may need 20 minutes a month or 20 minutes every 2 or 3 months to optimize their stuff. So just know there's lots of variables. It's different for everyone. So what I would recommend is try and apply this formula that I'm going to share to your exact situation and take the time you need, whether it's more or less. Now, before we jump into it, if you guys are looking to learn ads so that you get better, whether you're brand new or maybe you're experienced and looking to take your ad game to the next level, and you want some one-on-one coaching or consulting, I really do believe it's the best way to learn. Whether you want that or you're actually looking for somebody to run your ads for you, for either one of those things, you can just go to my website, philgrahamdigital.com, or you can DM me on Instagram at philgrahamdigital, and I would love to connect with you. Also, if you guys ever have ideas for topics for this podcast, feel free to connect with me and let me know, because so much of what I cover comes straight from you guys. All right, so let's dive right in, my friends, and talk about 20 minutes a day for optimizing your ads. And remember, there's lots of variables, so apply this to your situation as needed. But in general, I'm going to start my first 5 minutes with reviewing performance metrics. That's really where I'm going to start. I'm going to look at the data. And so I'm going to look at all the core metrics, things like click-through rate, cost per click, return on ad spend, CPM. Obviously, if you're selling something or getting leads, what did it cost to get a sale, or what did it cost to get a lead, and frequency and different things like that. We're going to look at all those important data points. Now, typically, let's say you don't have a lot of time. It's good to scan all those things, but sometimes you may only be looking at a couple of the most important ones, and that's okay. And you can kind of rotate those if you're doing it daily so that over the course of a few days, you've seen everything. If you have time, obviously it's best to look at everything. But my suggestion is to create the columns that you want in Ads Manager, and you can actually save that as a view, because a lot of times what you want doesn't come up in the normal columns. You can customize your columns, save the view, and then just go right to it, and it'll speed things up. And then based off of what you see, you start thinking about, oh, I might want to scale this, I might want to cut this back. But the important thing is, number one, you're not going to typically make these changes based off of one day's data or one piece of data or even 1 week's worth of data usually. You want to make changes based off of patterns and trends that you're seeing in the data. I cannot emphasize this enough. Patterns and trends, not just one day, not just one piece of data, not just one week. Patterns and trends, my friends. Don't forget that. If you remember just that alone could make a huge difference and give you guys an edge. And the second thing is, so many people will make changes when they've just launched something. So for example, let's say I'm going in there today evaluating data, and I've got some different ads, and I'm looking at one that I just launched, let's say like 2 days ago. Well, I'm not going to touch that yet. Now, if it's a client with a really large budget and it's like $5,000 or $20,000 a day, that's different. But for like a normal budget, I'm not touching that for at least a week, maybe 2 weeks or more potentially. So you've got to give things enough time to run before you make those changes. So make sure you remember that as well. So we spend the first 5 minutes reviewing those metrics, making some potential initial decisions on what we might want to scale or cut or change based off of patterns. And then the next 5 minutes I would spend looking at my creatives, seeing if anything needs to be refreshed. So I'm going to look for any kind of ad fatigue messages. I'm also going to look at the frequency column to see how often that ad has been served to the audience. I'm going to look at obviously the numbers and performance of the ad. I'm going to look at engagement and different things like that. Now, I will say that we have had situations where an ad was in creative fatigue, yet it was still crushing it. In fact, it was selling way more and doing way better than some ads that were not in creative fatigue. So just because I might see that message, I don't automatically turn it off because of that. I look at everything and then make a decision based off of what I see. That doesn't mean we're trying to get ads in fatigue, because a lot of times we may not want that. So make sure you look at all the data. But what I'm looking at here is when you do have an ad in creative or ad fatigue, and let's say it's not doing very well, this is where you can look at making some changes. If you've got some creatives that you haven't used that are ready to go, maybe in your rotation that you were planning to launch, this is where you might swap them out. So change the image or change the video. Consistently refreshing your creatives, but giving them enough time to actually work can really make a big difference. So you don't want to do it too often, but you also want to make sure that if it's not working and it's run long enough, this is a great time to make those changes, whether you're going to actually refresh them right then and there, or you're going to make a plan on a new piece of creative you need very quickly in order to come back in and do that later. So the first 5 minutes, we reviewed our overall metrics, and then we reviewed in the next 5 minutes our creatives and ad fatigue and what might need to be refreshed. Our next 5 minutes, I'm going to spend adjusting and reviewing audience targeting. So we're going to analyze how our different audiences are performing. So if we've got a specific audience that isn't doing very well, I'm going to look at why it's not doing well. I'm going to try and find out what's the reason. Because if we've got other ones that are doing well and this one isn't, I'm going to compare and contrast those. And then I'm also going to make a change if it's been running long enough, of course, and I will refine that audience in some way. Sometimes I'll just change that audience and maybe add a demographic or interest or behavior to it. Sometimes I'll take something away from it, and other times I'll do something completely different. So for example, let's say we have an Advantage Plus audience and it's doing horrible. A lot of times I'm going to try a interest and behavior-based segmented audience instead and see how that does. But I'm going to look at refining our audiences and really making segmented audiences and testing those against broad audiences, and either making those changes now or just evaluating what's going on, taking the notes so that when you're coming back in later to make new ads, you know exactly what to do. And then our last 5 minutes, I would spend evaluating our ad copy. Now, this is different than creatives. The creatives refer to images and videos. Ad copy is really important. So during this time, I'm going to scan our ads and I'm going to see how they're doing. I'm going to look at all the numbers and I'm going to see if any changes need to be made. And of course, if I just launched something a few days ago, I'm not going to change that yet. But if it's been running a while and it's not where I want it to be, or I think it could be better, that's where I'm going to look at making some changes. And this is something that can make a big difference. So here's a quick tip, a quick win that you guys can try. Make an A/B split test with an ad you're currently running and just change one thing. And I would suggest starting with the headline. So keep what you're running now, make a second ad with a completely different headline with a really good hook, and test those against each other, because sometimes just making some minor adjustments in the ad copy can actually make a huge difference. A lot of times you do not need an entire brand new ad. You might just need to change one small aspect of an ad for it to do better. Not always, but a lot of times that might happen. I've seen that happen over and over again, quite frequently. So the things I look at in terms of, what could we tweak? What could we split test and change? I already mentioned the headline. That's one. The second thing that I do pretty often is change what's at the beginning of the ad copy above the creative, above the image or video. And that is something I'll go in and change and test. And I make sure that there's a hook there. There's some kind of hook to get people's attention. And so I'll go with a completely different hook or ad angle or pain point at the start of that, and I'll leave the rest of the ad the same. And so again, like I said, making these small changes and then testing and then letting them run long enough, that is something that has worked really well for us. And that's something that could make a big difference in a lot of situations. So I love this too. It's a lot of fun. It's like being a little scientist in a lab and really going off of data and combining the creatives with the data. It's fun. So make sure you guys do that with your ad copy. So that's our 20 minutes. We have reviewed our overall metrics. We refreshed our creatives or made a plan to. We refreshed or made a plan to change our audiences if they needed it, and then also our ad copy. And then if we have an extra minute or two, or if not, we'll make it. It's also a good time to just look at your budget, where you're at for the day, for the month. Is it where you want to be? Maybe you should be spending less, or maybe you should be scaling and spending more. And just make sure that you know where your budget is and just review that, because that's important to do on a regular basis as well. So really, in summary, optimizing your ads does not have to take forever. Making small, consistent changes, especially if you're doing it with a high level of skill, can sometimes make a big difference. So what I recommend you guys do is to set aside that 20 minutes, whether it's per hour, per day, per week, whatever time you need to make it work for you, depending on your situation, but set that aside and really optimize your ads and your campaigns. And let's see how that goes, because that is something that can work really well for a lot of advertisers. So my friends, episode 390 is in the books. Thank you so much for being here. Got another great episode coming up next week. Until then, if you want to get in touch, philgrahamdigital.com is the website, or you can DM me on Instagram at philgrahamdigital. And I will talk to you on next week's episode. Peace out.
Thanks for listening to the Next Level Facebook Ads Podcast. Please remember to subscribe and share this with all your friends. For show notes, more tips, and to learn more about Phil, please visit philgrahamdigital.com/podcast.